If you're over 60 and you feel tired all the time, even after a full night's sleep, I want you to hear this very clearly right from the start. That exhaustion might not be aging. It might not be just how things are now. In fact, it could be coming from something you take every single day, something most people never suspect, and something sitting quietly in your medicine cabinet. And that's exactly why this conversation matters, because I see this pattern over and over again in people I speak with and educate. Seniors who feel worn down, heavy, foggy, and slow, not because their bodies are failing them, but because their medications are quietly draining their energy without anyone ever pointing it out. What worries me most is that many people assume this tiredness is inevitable, that it's simply the cost of getting older, when in reality, it's often a side effect that no one has taken the time to connect. I'm Dr. Thomas Bennett, and in my years working with older adults, this is one of the most common reasons I see seniors lose their energy. Let me ask you something that might feel a little uncomfortable at first. Have you ever woken up in the morning and felt like you never really slept? You get out of bed, but your body feels sluggish. You sit down to read or watch television, and your eyelids start to droop. You try to get through a normal day, maybe a few errands or light chores, and by noon you're already looking for a chair. Eventually you start telling yourself, well, I guess this is just what 70 feels like. Or this must be what happens in your 60s. But here's the truth most people never hear. Normal aging does not mean constant exhaustion. It does not mean losing your spark by lunchtime, and it certainly doesn't mean feeling like your body is working against you every single day. Over the years, I've had countless patients come into my office with the same complaint. They don't feel sick. They don't feel depressed. They just feel drained. They describe it as a low battery that never quite recharges, no matter how much they rest. And when blood work looks normal and scans look fine and sleep studies don't show anything alarming, the conversation often stops there. The assumption becomes that nothing is wrong enough to fix. But that's where we miss the real issue, because one of the most common and most overlooked causes of low energy in seniors is medication. Not one medication necessarily, but the combined effect of medications that are very commonly prescribed, often with good intentions, often taken exactly as directed. I want to be very clear here because this is important. Medications save lives. They control blood pressure, protect the heart, ease pain, calm anxiety, and help people function. This conversation is not about fear or blame. It's about awareness. It's about understanding how certain medications can affect the aging body differently than they did years ago, and how those effects can quietly add up until energy becomes the first thing to disappear. And once you see this pattern, once you understand it, you can't unsee it. You start to recognize why so many people feel tired without knowing why. Let me tell you about a patient named Margaret. Margaret was 72 years old when she came to see me, and what struck me immediately was that she looked frustrated, not frail. She was mentally sharp, independent, and still trying to stay active, but she said something that stuck with me. She said, "Doctor, I don't feel sick. I just feel done by noon." By early afternoon, she needed a nap. By evening, she had no energy left to enjoy her time. She wasn't asking to feel young again. She just wanted to stop feeling exhausted all the time. We ran the usual tests and everything looked fine. Her heart was stable, her labs were normal. Her sleep wasn't perfect, but it wasn't terrible either. So I asked her one simple question that often reveals more than any test. I asked her to walk me through everything she took in a typical day. She pulled out a list: blood pressure medication, a pill to help her sleep, something for anxiety, an allergy medication she'd been taking for years. None of these were unusual. None of them were considered dangerous on their own, but together they told a very different story. This is where things start to click for many people, because they realize that no one has ever looked at the whole picture. Each medication was prescribed at a different time, often by different doctors, each for a valid reason. But no one had stopped to ask how they might be affecting her energy as a group. Let's start with blood pressure medications, because they're one of the most common categories I see linked to fatigue in seniors. These medications are incredibly important, and for many people they are absolutely necessary. But certain types work by slowing the heart rate or relaxing blood vessels. That's how they reduce pressure. The problem is that in some older adults, this same mechanism can also reduce how much oxygen-rich blood reaches muscles and tissues, especially during activity. The result is a feeling people describe as heaviness or sluggishness. They move slower, they tire more quickly. They don't feel sharp or alert the way they used to. And because these changes happen gradually, most people never connect them to the medication. They simply assume their body is aging faster than expected. What makes this tricky is that the medication's doing its job. Blood pressure numbers look good, so no one questions it. But energy isn't measured in a blood test. It shows up in how you feel during the day. And that's often dismissed or overlooked. I can't tell you how many times I've heard someone say, "My numbers are great, but I feel terrible." That disconnect is a major clue, and it's one we often ignore. Then there are sleep medications and sedatives, another category that quietly steals energy from seniors. These include prescription sleep aids, medications for anxiety, and certain muscle relaxers. These drugs calm the nervous system, which can be helpful at night. They don't always stop working when the sun comes up. In older bodies, medications often stay in the system longer. The liver processes them more slowly, and the brain becomes more sensitive to their effects. The result is morning grogginess that can last all day, brain fog, poor balance, slower reaction times, and a deep kind of fatigue that rest doesn't fix. Many seniors tell me that they sleep for 8 hours but never feel refreshed. That's because sedation is not the same thing as restorative sleep. And over time, living in a mildly sedated state can drain energy in a way that's hard to put into words. Margaret had been taking a mild sleep medication for years. No one had questioned it because it wasn't causing obvious problems. She assumed that if she still had the prescription, she must still need it. But when we looked at her symptoms through the lens of energy, it became clear that this medication might be playing a bigger role than anyone realized. We didn't stop anything abruptly. We adjusted carefully and safely, and over time, something surprising happened. She started waking up clearer. Her afternoons became more manageable. She didn't feel like she was dragging herself through the day anymore. Another group of medications that often flies under the radar is allergy and cold medications, especially older antihistamines. Now, these are commonly taken for allergies, congestion, sleep, or even just in case. And many of them are available over the counter, which gives people a false sense of security. But these medications can cross into the brain and block chemicals responsible for alertness. In seniors, that effect is stronger. The result can be drowsiness, confusion, memory issues, and a noticeable drop in motivation. Because these medications don't require a prescription, people rarely mention them during doctor visits, and doctors don't always think to ask. But their impact on energy can be significant. Then there are pain and nerve medications, often prescribed for back pain, arthritis, or nerve discomfort. Pain itself is exhausting, so the goal is always to reduce it. But many of these medications act on the nervous system in ways that dull more than just pain. They can dull alertness, motivation, and mental clarity. Seniors often describe feeling disconnected or flat, like they're moving through the day without fully being present. And because pain limits movement, this can create a cycle where fatigue leads to less activity, which leads to more stiffness and discomfort, which leads to more medication. Energy gets lost in the middle of that cycle. Now, I want to pause here and make something very clear. Medications are not the enemy. The real problem is unexamined medication lists. The biggest issue I see in senior healthcare is not over-medication, in the dramatic sense, but lack of regular reassessment. Bodies change. Needs change. What made sense 5 or 10 years ago may not make sense now, especially when energy is disappearing and no one is asking why. This brings us to something most people have never heard of, but almost everyone experiences to some degree, and that's medication stacking. This is what happens when multiple medications, each with fatigue as a possible side effect, are taken together. One might lower blood pressure slightly, another might calm the nervous system, another might reduce alertness just a bit. Individually, these effects seem small. Together, they can completely change how a person feels. The side effects don't just add up, they multiply. And because prescriptions are usually evaluated one at a time, very few people ever look at the full picture and connect it to energy loss. As we age, now our bodies handle medications differently. The liver and kidneys slow down. Muscle mass decreases. Brain sensitivity increases. A dose that felt fine at 55 can feel overwhelming at 70. Yet doses often stay the same for years, simply because no one has a reason to change them. Energy complaints are brushed off as normal, and the cycle continues. Here's the most important part of this conversation, and we'll go deeper into it next. Feeling tired all the time is not something you should ignore. It's information. It's your body telling you something has shifted, and while you should never stop medications on your own, you absolutely can and should ask better questions. In the next part, I'm going to show you exactly how to do that, what a proper medication review actually looks like, in the single sentence that can completely change the conversation with your doctor. Because once you understand how medications affect energy, you stop blaming your age and you start taking your quality of life seriously again. Now let's pick up exactly where we left off, because once you understand that medications can quietly drain energy, the next question becomes unavoidable. Why does this happen so often, and why does it go unnoticed for so long? The answer is simpler than most people expect. In modern healthcare, medications are usually evaluated one at a time, not as a system. Each prescription is written to solve a specific problem, and if that problem appears controlled on paper, the conversation often stops there. Blood pressure looks good, pain is manageable, anxiety is calmer, sleep is happening. But nowhere in that checklist is a box that asks, how is this person actually feeling during the day? Energy is subjective. It doesn't show up neatly on a chart. And because of that, it's often dismissed as something vague or inevitable, especially in older adults. This is where medication stacking becomes such a powerful and dangerous factor. Medication stacking doesn't mean you're taking something you shouldn't be. It means you're taking several things that each have fatigue as a possible side effect, and together they create a level of exhaustion that no single medication would cause on its own. One lowers blood pressure slightly, another calms the nervous system, another dulls alertness just a bit. None of them seem extreme, but your body doesn't experience them separately. It experiences them all at once. The result is a system that's constantly being told to slow down, quiet down, and conserve energy. Over time, that message becomes your daily reality. I've had many patients tell me they feel like they're moving through water, like everything takes more effort than it should. They're not depressed, they're not unmotivated. They're simply running on a system that's being chemically encouraged to stay subdued. And because this happens gradually, it's incredibly easy to blame age instead of looking deeper. Friends say, well, you're not 30 anymore. Family members say you should rest more. Even doctors may say, that's normal for your age. But normal does not mean unavoidable, and it certainly doesn't mean untreatable. Another piece of this puzzle is how the body changes with age. As we get older, the liver becomes less efficient at breaking down medications, and the kidneys take longer to clear them from the bloodstream. Muscle mass decreases, which changes how drugs are distributed in the body. The brain becomes more sensitive to substances that affect alertness, balance, and mood. All of this means that medications you tolerated well years ago can start to feel much stronger, even if the dose hasn't changed. Yet many prescriptions are renewed year after year without anyone asking whether the original need still exists or whether the dose is still appropriate. This is why regular medication reviews are so important, and why they're often missing. A proper medication review isn't rushed. It's not just a quick glance at a list. It's a conversation that looks at the whole person, not just the diagnoses. It asks whether each medication is still needed, whether two medications are doing the same job, whether timing could make a difference, and whether side effects like fatigue are quietly interfering with daily life. Unfortunately, many seniors never experience this kind of review unless they actively ask for it. I want to share another story that highlights how powerful this process can be. A daughter once came to me worried about her mother, who had gone from being active and social to sitting quietly most of the day. She wasn't sad. She wasn't confused. She just didn't have the energy to engage anymore. Doctors had told the family that this was simply a part of getting older. But when we looked closely at her medication list, we saw several drugs that affected blood pressure, alertness, and the nervous system. Each one had been prescribed for a good reason at the time, but together they were quietly pulling her energy down. With careful adjustments and close monitoring, her energy improved, not dramatically overnight, but enough that she started participating in life again. That change didn't come from adding something new. It came from reevaluating what was already there. This brings us to the most important practical takeaway from everything we've discussed. If you're feeling chronically tired, foggy, or slowed down, the goal is not to guess which medication might be responsible, and it's definitely not to stop anything on your own. The goal is to change the conversation with your healthcare provider. And this is where many people feel unsure. They don't want to seem difficult. They don't want to question their doctor. They don't want to complain. But advocating for your energy is not complaining. It's participating in your own care. Earlier, I promised you one sentence that can open the door to a meaningful discussion. And here it is again, because it really is that important. Can we review my medications specifically to see which ones may be contributing to fatigue? That sentence does several things at once. It doesn't accuse. It doesn't demand. It doesn't assume anything is wrong. It simply reframes the goal of the visit. Instead of focusing only on numbers and diagnoses, it focuses on how you feel and how your medications might be affecting your quality of life. When that question is asked, a good review can begin. And a good review looks at patterns, not just individual drugs. It considers whether doses can be adjusted, whether timing can be changed, whether something that was once necessary may no longer be needed, or whether there's a safer alternative with fewer effects on energy. Sometimes a solution is as simple as moving a medication to a different time of day. Sometimes it involves lowering a dose. Sometimes it means slowly tapering something that's no longer serving its purpose. These are small changes, but they can have a surprisingly large impact on how a person feels. It's also important to understand that energy is not just about feeling awake. Energy affects balance, reaction time, motivation, and independence. When energy drops, people move less. When they move less, muscles weaken, balance suffers, confidence declines, social engagement fades. What starts as fatigue can quietly snowball into a much bigger loss of quality of life. That's why addressing energy is not a luxury. It's a foundation for healthy aging. I want to be very clear about safety here. Medications should never be stopped abruptly, especially in older adults. Sudden changes can be dangerous. Any adjustments should be made gradually and under medical supervision. This process is not about rebellion or distrust. It's about optimization. It's about making sure that what you're taking is still helping more than it's hurting, and that your treatment plan reflects who you are now, not who you were years ago. One of the most frustrating things I hear from seniors is the feeling that they're supposed to accept fatigue as the price of survival, as if living longer automatically means living with less vitality. That doesn't have to be true. Many people regain noticeable energy simply by having their medications looked at through the right lens. Not everyone will feel dramatically different, but almost everyone benefits from being heard and taken seriously. Let's return to Margaret for a moment, because her story illustrates this perfectly. After we carefully adjusted her medications, she didn't suddenly run marathons or feel decades younger, but she did feel clearer. She could get through the day without feeling completely drained. She started enjoying her evenings again, instead of counting the hours until bedtime. When she came back for a follow-up, and she said something that I think about often. She said, "I don't feel young, but I feel alive again. That's the goal. Not youth, but vitality. Not perfection, but presence." So here's what I want you to take away from this entire conversation. Feeling tired all the time is not something you should automatically accept as normal aging. It's a signal worth investigating. Medications, especially common ones taken for years, can quietly drain energy in ways that are easy to miss and hard to connect. But with awareness, good questions, and thoughtful reviews, many people can reclaim a level of energy they thought was gone for good. And before we end, I want to leave you with one clear question, because clarity matters more than anything else here. When was the last time your medications were reviewed specifically with your energy and daily functioning in mind? Not just whether they're controlling a condition, but how they're affecting your life. If the answer is, "I don't remember" or "never," then that's your next step. Schedule a conversation, ask the question. Advocate for how you feel. And if this message helped you understand your own experience, or helped you see someone you care about more clearly, share it with them. Too many seniors are living with unnecessary fatigue simply because no one ever explained this connection. Energy is not just about getting through the day, it's about living it.